Think I'm live now. Let's see here. I can't remember where I put it. This one. Hello, Chris. How are you doing? I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to do this or if I should just move on to Lost Odyssey. I've had some additional thoughts about this. Hi, Chrissy. I've had some additional thoughts about this, but it's getting so, like, muddied and just, like, bloated that I don't even know it's worth doing. It's like an overwhelming thing. This leads me back to thinking maybe I should just record me talking about it again. But like if I was going to do that, I've got the podcasts like Lore Runner Show, the 2 podcasts, hours and hours of me talking about this already. So why do it again? I don't want to turn it into several video series because that's a lot more freaking work, and I don't want to release it in parts because the backlash from it is not worth taking over and over and over again. If I did this, I would just do it in one thing. This is my thoughts on this, and then not touch it ever again because it's just not worth it. There are too many people who don't want to have the negativity, right? So anything you say that's a criticism, they'll just label it as being a negative Nancy, and I don't want the channel to turn into a multiple part series of me just being like hypercritical or something. I'll just get it done with one shot and move on. But I've been thinking about ways to try and alter the tone a bit so that it doesn't feel too much like that. But is there one particular point you feel like just hasn't been covered well enough? It's not that so much as the fact that roughly 4 or 5% of the audience will even be aware that I have even talked about this at all because it's been on the archive channel with the podcast. And I think that voicing some of these things on the main channel is worth doing because there are people there who are interested who don't follow the podcast, if that makes sense, who won't watch a 3-hour stream or whatever, but they will watch a, well, if this goes the way it's going, it'd be freaking at least an hour-long video on it, but anyways. I am not super passionate about it, but I did tell people I was going to do it. So I feel bound to do it in some sense because of that, because people are waiting for me to release a video on it. What's up, Karnak and Hat? And who else? We had someone else. It was Bowzakana. What's up? Hat says, in my honest opinion, it is becoming a growing sentiment that it is a sequel rather than a remake. That's exactly right. And the game has been out for 2 weeks, so while your analysis is spot on, it's kind of preaching to the choir. However, I love the analysis of the game part and analysis of an FF title, or even a FF7 compilation analysis. Basically, this is a good sequel. Or is this a good sequel? What's up, Bryce? Sounds good. I feel strongly about the message. Like, stand by my positions on this. And I do think saying something on the main channel is probably important. I just don't feel as, like, emotionally invested in saying it as I did 2 weeks ago. It's hard to explain. Like, I've already expressed all of the emotion that I had about this. So, like, I got all of the weight off my chest, so to speak. So now I no longer feel like this burning drive, like, I gotta talk about this. But I do think the points that I make are important, and a lot of them are not being shared by other creators. Specifically the points on, like, what is the actual spirit of Final Fantasy, things of that nature. So, I don't know. Right. I think that this is something people on the main channel would like to see. So I want to do it for that reason. But it isn't because I really want to do it, if that makes sense. Because I know that, like, I'm just going to I'm going to catch a lot of grief for it. People are going to freaking be pissed. There's really no way around it. Like, I've been getting messages, like, pretty much thousands of messages a day for the last few days. And it's been real disappointing that something like 10 or 15% of them, maybe more, but I'm going to be generous and say 10 or 15% of them, are people just strawmanning me constantly. Here's a good example. I'll show you a recent comment that I just responded to. How is this a good podcast when they are complaining the FF7 remake combat is too complex and hard? Clearly, we never said that or anything even remotely like that. These words were not words we said. So, like, you kind of just can't, like, escape people just saying whatever the frick they want to say and attributing it to you. And that's disheartening, because when you put as much time and effort into carefully articulating what you think and what you mean, for people to just, like, throw that in the garbage, you actually said this, it's like, what's the point? Why am I even talking? Well, to recap, I guess what I said was, when you put so much time and effort, like the real time, like the amount of time that goes into making a video like this, the energy, when you spend that much time carefully articulating what you mean to say, and then someone will just say, I ignore all that, what you actually said was this, and you're stupid for that. It makes it beggars the question, like, what is the point of saying it in the first place? What is the point of putting so much energy into something that people will just dismiss and not listen to and claim that you said this other stupid thing? Like, when something around 15% of the people watching are going to do that, I know that's a minority, but I don't consider that to be a small minority. It's like, why not just make something people will like to watch more than... I don't know what I'm saying. I hope you guys get it. Hello, Dude McGuy. I would just do, is FF7 Remake a good introduction to FF7 and skip the whole remake, reimagining, etc.? I'm thinking about that. Like, taking that whole section out, right? Basically wrap up with go play it on PS1 first, then you decide for yourself. That's not... I agree with the part about, like, it's probably not worth the time to spend so much time trying to, like, define what a remake is. I've come around on that to where I know that I'm freaking right, but people just don't want to listen to that. They still want to think a remake can be whatever the fetch you want it to be. And there's no convincing these people, so it's kind of, like, worthless to even, like, bring it up. But I do think some of the more... I think maybe if I approach this kind of like I did the FF13 discussion series, that might go a little better. So, like, with each point that I make, it could be a good idea to, like, give, like, the alternate look at it simultaneously. So, you know, talking about, like, the story changes. Make sure to say that if you're a person who is excited about the fact that the story will not be going the same, and that you're glad that you can be surprised by things coming up and that excites you, like, you may be into this. But if what you were looking for was something that was faithful to the original, this might be something that you're not into. You know, kind of like that more like top-down approach to talking about it rather than like getting real personal in how I say. I hope I'm making sense. Did you side on Square versus Square Enix idea? I am leaning that way more. Like, that being the ultimate point, right? Essentially, like, where this would conclude is to say that I'm done with Final Fantasy. And that Square Enix and Squaresoft do not have the same philosophy as to what a Final Fantasy game is. Hi, Bryce. The Sakaguchi versus Wada thing. I think that is ultimately the point I want to make. And I think that that's probably the most unique point that I've made in all of this. So that might be where I want to center my thesis and, like, center my thoughts on. That could really focus it. Well, but they're clearly stupid for thinking what they do since they clearly didn't comprehend your video, so don't bother with what they think. Seriously, it's not worth your time. It's not worth ruining your day over. Other people are smart and do appreciate what you have to say and will enjoy your video. Just focus on them. Some smart people may disagree with your points. If they do, they'll do so in a respectful, fair, and intelligent way. It's easy to say, harder to do when you're freaking bombarded with it all day long. So, the thesis is that the spirit of Final Fantasy under Sakaguchi was different. I think I've talked to you about this somewhat in separate messages or in our video chats, Chrissy. You know, the being hard against doing sequels and turning it into a product or franchise and milking it and expanding stories into, like, multiple iterations, and, like, all of that was against Sakaguchi's philosophy, and Yuichi Wada was all for, like, sequelizing everything. And he became the president. Wada became the president. Sakaguchi fell out of favor in the company, and Wada's philosophy became the new Final Fantasy. Right? That's kind of like the idea that I would more or less, like, center the video on. And that's kind of how I feel too, right, Bryce? Like, I've tried to make it clear across those podcasts and stuff. Like, I'm not here to dissuade anybody from liking the game if they like it. Like, if you're into it, like, that's great. Like, you got a lot of cool stuff to look forward to. You have legitimate reasons for feeling the way you do and for liking it. Like, I'm not here to tell you, like, you're wrong. I'm just telling you what I think. I'm just bringing up points as to explain my position on it. And people have a very hard time accepting that. This sounds like a plot for a Final Fantasy game in and of itself. Yeah. There's been some really, really weird stuff that has come out today about, it's coming from the Ultimania, right? I don't know if you guys saw this. I was having a conversation behind the scenes with Soldier First Class And he brought where'd it go? It's too far up. Oh, here we go. This. So this tweet, right? This is the Japanese Ultimania. It's talking about how there are 4 different Sephiroths that appear in the game. Like, it's not the same person. He's 4 different Sephiroths from this one in black. It's talking about how this is the the dudes with the tattoos, right? That he's sort of like mind controlling. So like that's the same as before. But then it's saying that there's like a time traveling one. There's the who I think is the Advent Children one, basically. So there's like the Advent Children Sephiroth time traveling back in time. Then there's the 2 cloaked men with the tattoos. Then there's a different one who shows up in chapters 13 and 16 as vague memories of Nibelheim. Then you got this guy who's the one that you see in like the Edge of Creation, who's different. And this one they're saying specifically, like it's hard to explain. I mean, you can read it for yourself. It's right here. But essentially what this seems to be implying is that this is the Sephiroth who might have the redemption arc in the story this time around. It's so effing crazy. What the fetch? Anyways, there's some whack stuff coming out of the Ultimania that is essentially confirming the alternate reality stuff, right? That the whole Zack thing that you see at the end is an alternate reality Zack, and that we're going to have these multiple timelines and realities fetching, like interacting with each other. And in the same breath, like there's Kitase saying that they're not going to change anything moving forward. Like it's going to basically follow the same story. And I'm like, someone is lying to me. I don't know if it's Nomura. I don't think it's Nomura. I think it's Kitase, but someone is lying because this is not going to follow the original story. There have to be significant changes if all this crap that you are saying is true in the Ultimania. So like, it's just such a freaking mess. Like someone is lying to me, and I'm very, very confident that it's Kitase. But, anyways, with all this stuff coming out, it's like, it's just so convoluted, the direction they are taking this. And it clearly means that this is, at best, a side sequel, right? But it's really more of a sequel. So, all these things we've been saying, the people are like, no, it's just Sephiroth has seen a vision of the future. He's not time traveling. It's like, it's even more complicated than that. It's even more crazy than that. Hello, Sage Valent. 4 different Sephiroths. That was my main complaint with the original FF7 story. It wasn't wacky enough. I'm burnt out on hearing about the discussion since finishing it Saturday morning. I've only watched spoiler discussions and analysis. I think that using FF7R's design and sequelish status would be more useful for making the main point about post-Sakaguchi FF design, rather than talking about FF7R's design and just explain. You know, I'm getting more and more confident about this being the point of the video. Take your opinion out of it as much as possible and just focus on how different it is from classic FF games. It'll probably come off as a better video. I'm leaning in that direction. Like I can say, you know, if you want my opinion on this or that or this or that, I've got 2 podcasts and a freaking 2 podcasts and I guess another podcast, but a stream I appeared on with Lore Runner, where you can go like see my thoughts on combat mechanics, or you can see my thoughts on like certain parts of the story or the ending, or you know, things of that nature. This video is not really about that. This video is about the state of Final Fantasy, basically. You know, that kind of thing. Just heard that stuff. OMG, I'm so done with Final Fantasy now. I'm actually more interested in Zack's new story than what they do in the remake. They said they weren't going to have to pad out the first game to make it a full game, too. All they do is lie. Yeah, it's a lot of PR speak. It's a lot of saying what they need to say, you know, to sell the game. The is it a good remake discussion is kind of pointless in that the fallacy here is because it isn't a good remake, it isn't a good game. Yeah, it's people get so confused on this point, right? Like, yeah, I think the whole part about like defining a remake is I'm feeling more and more like there's no point in doing that, even though I feel like extremely confident that I am right on that account. Like, I do not back down whatsoever from the points I made on that, but I just think it will confuse the conversation too much. However, it seems to me what you want to really say in general is it isn't a good Final Fantasy game. Correct. But it is an okay game otherwise. Or the things about Final Fantasy are not there for you. So while some may appreciate Crisis Core 3, it is difficult for you to appreciate. That's a good way of putting it. The same way you would appreciate an FF title. I think it is time to move on to an actual Sakaguchi game, The Lost Odyssey. Yes, also. Okay. Here's what I think I'm gonna do. I don't want to waste a lot of time writing a freaking script for this. I'm going to feel my way through this organically. And, you know, edit it. Because this takes way too much freaking time. So why don't we... I'll maybe do that tomorrow. I'll try and, like, record that tomorrow. With that as my, like, central point. Well... I tried to do that last time, and then I couldn't do it. Let me think about this. What if I do a new document, and I call it, What is Final Fantasy? Or something like that. And... bullet point. Bullet point. Let's see. This video has changed and evolved like crazy in the past 2 weeks. It's been discussed like crazy. There are lots of people falling to one side or another. I'm not really interested in talking about whether this is a good game or not. If you want my opinions on things like combat, story changes, and ending, you can watch my podcasts on that stuff. This video is about the state of Final Fantasy. How I feel it has been fundamentally transformed into something opposite of what the Something like that would be like the opening. Maybe I can summarize a couple of thoughts. Summarize thoughts on what you think they did right and wrong. Positive characters. Weapon upgrading materia. Certain expansions on story. Specific moments of the story, like Barrett crying when plate falls and VR simulation in Shinra HQ. Negatives. Changes to scenes that lessen their impact and lessen their power. Alternate timeline shenanigans. That's not how you spell that. FF13 design philosophy. Padding out the game and hurting the Yeah, it's kind of what I'm doing right now with this part of it. Read quotes. Build case for Sakaguchi's philosophy. Tell the story about Wada. Demonstrate how the philosophy changed the day almost to the day that Sakaguchi walked out the door. Funny anecdote, I got full of 3-amp DAC and a card on the inside just states, "Hi, I'm full of shit." And the speakers are titled exactly the same in my choice of output devices. They seem to really be play heavily into their shitty marketing. That is funny. That's very funny. interested? Is that what I meant to say? Talk about how you want, or about how you fell in love with Sakaguchi's philosophy. Not the name, not the brand name. Final Fantasy. Conclude that while the objective quality of FF7R is very high and that it is a good game, it is not what I'm looking for in a Final Fantasy game. Well, it's not even just that. It follows a design structure I do not enjoy and has changed Final Fantasy into something I'm no longer interested in. I'm done with Final Fantasy. I sincerely hope those of you who are into this continue to have great experiences with the games moving forward. I'm out. Something like that. That would be the basic structure of the video. It could be a lot shorter. And get to the point and essentially build my case while stating it's not a bad game. I think the proper ratio of positive to negative to get Twitter people to not be upset with you is infinity to 0. I know, right? What's been really interesting about like a lot of the negative feedback I've gotten is just people, it's been surprising. I guess it's not that surprising when you really think about it. But people want positivity. Like they don't care about whether the thoughts are well reasoned. And this goes back to the hype thing, right? Probably mentioned that somewhere in this video. Like the reason people get so into hype culture is because it feels good to be excited about something. Like it literally changes your brain chemistry. It makes you happy to hope for and be excited for something that is coming. And people like to get together and like share that excitement and positivity. And they want a place online for that to happen. So when the thing comes out and people are being critical of it, it ruins that experience. It taints the hype that made them feel better or feel good or whatever. And they don't want to hear that. And it's just been funny because it's like I don't even consider what I've been saying to be negative, right? I'm not like sitting here feeling like crap over this game. I mean, I was initially kind of frustrated and stuff, but like I'm not, when I'm talking about it, I'm not having like negative feelings. I'm just think it's interesting to discuss. What's this? I think the thing you guys overlooked when you complained about the power level is the fact that the 1v1 takes place in Cloud's head like the original. I don't even know if that's true. I think he made that up. Also, maybe Cloud hold back his power level the whole time. I don't find it too much at all in the end. He has at least abilities like a soldier. After all, Rosh is a lower rank and does crazy shit too. Explanation doesn't work for me personally because many of the scenes, the rest of the party is also present, which muddles that explanation. In addition to, yeah, I mean, they're just gonna kind of, you know, they'll do whatever it takes to justify liking it. That's fine too. Like whatever you want to like. What's up, Legendary Masamune? All right, I think I'm just gonna try and do this tomorrow. So for now, let's just turn back to Lost Odyssey real quick and see if we can make some progress on that. I don't know if I want to use the word ambition here. I need a different word. Inspiration. Maybe motif would be a good word. There's no better way to summarize Lost Odyssey's central aspiration. Maybe aspiration. So it's not quite message or theme. It's like what its goal is, what it's trying to evoke in the player. So I think aspiration might be a good word. There's no better way to summarize Lost Odyssey's central aspiration. This is not a comma we need. Than with this quote from the game's composer, renowned Final Fantasy legend Hironobu Sakaguchi. When I was composing the main theme, I often imagined what it would be like to live for 1,000 years. It must be so intolerable and painful seeing your family, friends, lovers, and friends dying while you remain living. This feeling drove me to write the theme in a minor key. However, I think you can still feel the relief when you hear the warm mother-like female voice in the song. Perhaps above anything else, Lost Odyssey sets out to do. It is this examination of eternal life might be like that I found most interesting. This word that can move, but then it looks wrong. Perhaps above anything else Lost Odyssey sets out to do, it is this examination of what eternal life might be like that I found to be the most promising idea. isn't an issue at all that you like it sometimes. I like it. That's kind of cringy too. I played DBZ Kakarot and it was a horrible RPG, but I kind of liked it because I watched it as a kid. We are all in the honeymoon stage, kind of like with FF15, where people will defend it with all sorts of headcanon sorcery. A lot of headcanon sorcery, man. A lot of it out there. Especially now that like this whole thing is cropped up with the, I don't have it on the screen anymore, but the 4 Sephiroth thing is, I'm already seeing it happening. It's JoJo's Bizarre. No, this is what is it? Fist of North Star. Oh, this is freaking. Anyway, let's not get too distracted here. Where's my other document? Here we go. Fortunately, Lost Odyssey is a timeless classic with virtually no flaws at all, in your opinion. I look forward to your nothing but boundless praise from the creators. Oh boy. Something will spark here. Good quote. Trying to think how I want to transition this into the actual retrospective side of it. I need to make a point, and I'm not sure what I want that point to be. I mean, I do, but I don't want to say it the way that I'm thinking, because people will be pissed right away. If anything else Lost Odyssey sets out to do, it is this examination of what eternal life might be like that I found to be the most promising idea. In framing this concept, yeah, concept's probably fine. This concept, in the form of a question, becomes a quandary that I think is really interesting to think about. Each of us has a drive, born with a drive to survive. Live long and fruitful lives and pursue as much happiness as we can. However, if one really could live forever, while those you love around you passed on, how do I frame this in a question better? I don't know if I need that last part. That might be unnecessary. Perhaps above anything else Lost Odyssey sets out to do, it is this examination of what eternal life might be like that I found to be the most promising idea. When framing this concept in the form of a question, it becomes a quandary that I find really interesting. Think about. Each of us is born with a drive to survive, to live long, fruitful lives, pursue as much happiness as we can. However, if one really could live forever, even while those old pass on, one could really live forever, even while those you love, I'll just say those around you, even while those around you grow old and pass on. I feel like I'm close. One could really live forever, even while those around you grow old and pass on. If you really could find yourself outlasting Something like that. Would the memories you make with those that pass build on your happiness, or would the constant loss of loved ones lead to a path of constant sorrow? That's a great way to put it, Karnak. That's very, very, very good. Would the memories you make with those that pass build on your happiness, or would the constant loss of loved ones lead to a path of endless sorrow? Increase. Oh. All right, let's see how this reads. It's all good, man. I do it all the time, too. There's no better way to summarize Lost Odyssey's central aspiration than with this quote from the game's composer, renowned Final Fantasy legend Nobuo Uematsu. When I was composing the main theme, I often imagined what it would be like to live for 1,000 years. It must be so intolerable and painful seeing your families, lovers, and friends dying while you remain living. This feeling drove me to write the theme in a minor key. However, I think you can still feel a relief when you hear the warm, mother-like female voice in the song. Perhaps above anything else Lost Odyssey sets out to do, it is this examination of what eternal life might be like that I found to be the most promising idea. When framing this concept in the form of a question, it becomes a quandary that I find really interesting to think about. Each of us is born with a drive to survive, to live long, fruitful lives, and to pursue as much happiness as we can. However, if one really could live forever, even while those around you grow old and pass on. Maybe I'll say die since I say pass on here in a second. Grow old and die. If you really could find yourself outlasting a world that constantly changes and suffer the losses that inevitably come alongside those difficult changes, how fulfilling would such a life really be? At what point would a person become fatigued with the world? Would the memories you make with those that pass on increase your happiness? Or would the constant loss of loved ones lead to a path of endless sorrow? Funeral scene of Lost Odyssey is the pinnacle of video game storytelling. Oh my gosh. That scene's so bad. While Lost Odyssey explores this theme in beautiful, nuanced ways through the many short stories told through its something dream sequences. What are they called? Dream sequences. There's like a name for it. I'll just call it 1,000 years. So it explores this theme in beautiful, nuanced ways. Thousand years of dreams. While Lost Odyssey explores this theme in beautiful, nuanced ways through the many short stories told in its 1,000 years of dreams, ultimately the main story that Location. Something like that. Nonetheless, it is a game with a strong sense of style and a solid foundation, and is considered a classic by many who have. I don't really think that that's a good way of saying that. Many players measures up to the great classics of the genre, or something like that. Something like that. Okay. All right. Thank you, Karnak. That was a really good suggestion. I appreciate it. I think that really pulls it together, so thank you. All right. Let's see here. Perhaps above anything else Lost Odyssey sets out to do, it is this examination of what eternal life might be like that I found to be the most promising idea. When framing this concept in the form of a question, it becomes a quandary I find really interesting to think about. Each of us is born with a drive to survive, to live long, fruitful lives, and pursue as much happiness as we can. However, if one really could live forever, even while those around you grow old and die, you really could find yourself outlasting a world that constantly changes, suffer the losses that inevitably come alongside those difficult changes. How fulfilling would such a life really be? At what point would a person become fatigued with the world? Would the memories you make with those that pass on increase your happiness, or would that constant loss of loved ones lead to a path of endless sorrow? While Lost Odyssey explores this theme in beautiful, nuanced ways through the many short stories told in its 1,000 years of dreams, ultimately the main story veers a bit off course in that regard. Nevertheless, it is a game with a strong sense of style and a solid foundation, and for many players measures up to the great classics of the genre. I think we can just go straight into talking about the development history after this. I'm even going so far as to call it the best Final Fantasy game of its console generation for those arguing for it over 13. I loved the novel scenes in Lost Odyssey. I understand with budget constraints, but I wish there was at least voice acting and some form of imagery to them. Don't know if it would ruin the experience, but maybe if a sequel for any reason happened. I'm not sure if voices would have helped those. That really would have affected the emotion of them, I think. Especially if the voice acting was bad, like a lot of the main games' voice acting was. I don't know, I'm not a fan of 13 and like Lost Odyssey more overall, but Lost Odyssey, I believe, has its own set of problems. I agree with that too. I think that would still rank it as a lower FF if it was an FF. I would probably put it somewhere in the middle-ish of the pack. I'd rank it somewhere around like FF8, personally. Not as bad as FF13, not as bad as some of my least favorite FFs, but certainly not one of the strongest either. But many people after Hironobu Sakaguchi left Square in 2003. Probably do a little bit of back history on Mistwalker itself. A little background. how would I say this? I'm trying to think. Famed Japanese RPG. Significant internal changes. Not quite. So, what happened was that, kind of like I've been talking about in podcasts and stuff recently, Sakaguchi always had a vision for, like, how the creative side of the company should be handled, right? Like, create new IPs, do something new every time. Don't like franchise stuff. Don't turn things into a product. Make them, keep their artistic integrity. He had a vision, a goal, a philosophy behind how to make games. Yoichi Wada, the COO, Sakaguchi at the time was the vice president. They butted heads on this because Wada wanted to make direct sequels to their Final Fantasy games to maximize the use of assets and game engines and to make as much money as possible by having quick turnaround on sequels. They butted heads on this like crazy. The company had tons of respect for Sakaguchi since he was the one who made Square what it is in the first place. And the president of the company at that time leaned on Sakaguchi's side. When the Spirits Within bombed, the company then began leaning really, really heavily towards Wada's side. So while they didn't run him off, they didn't run Sakaguchi out of the company necessarily. He stepped down, which is almost a ritualistic thing to do in the Japanese corporate world when you make a blunder like that. He essentially just stepped out of the executive side of the company and became the executive producer, manager of Final Fantasy exclusively. But he was aware before the movie came out that it was not going to do well. Like their projections were that they were going to lose a lot of money on the movie. The project was not well handled and managed, and there was a lot of problems. And they were aware that they were going to fall into the red line on that year's, or that fiscal year's reporting, which was going to be very bad for the shareholders. It was going to look bad in terms of their current talks with merging with Enix. It was going to set the company back big time. And a big part of the reason why that ended up happening was because the delay of Final Fantasy X. If Final Fantasy X had come out in the first quarter of that fiscal year, they would not have dipped into the red. And it might not have gone quite so badly. But because it had to be delayed into quarter two, they had to report for the previous fiscal year basically a significant loss. And that really hurt Sakaguchi's standing in the executive side of the company's, the executive part of the company, the business side. So in response to this, knowing it was going to happen, he actually registered Mistwalker, the trademark, and set up the domain name, and had a plan already in place to walk away from Square. So he was already prepared to do this. But he stayed with Square for 2 more years after this, basically in the executive producer of Final Fantasy role. So he still put the team together that would eventually make Final Fantasy 12. Like he picked Yasumi Matsuno to direct. He organized that team. He was still involved with like producing Final Fantasy 11. He was still there working for 2 years after he stepped down from being executive vice president. But he did this with the knowledge in the back of his head that he was going to walk away and form his own independent studio in the future. So while he was doing this work for Square, he was also setting up for his departure from the company. So they didn't run him out necessarily. They certainly pressured him to step down from being vice president, but they did not actually like fire him. Right? He was just forced to accept a lesser role within the company, more focused on the creative side than the business side, and he didn't want to live with that. He wanted to go do his own thing. So that's essentially what happened. I have, yes. It's freaking hilarious. One of Mega 64's best videos, in my opinion. One of my favorites from them. Around the turn of the century, famed Japanese RPG studio Squaresoft was undergoing some significant internal changes. They were in talks for a merger with the longtime rival company Enix. Had already dived. Is it dived or dove? I feel like maybe dived. Had already dived head first. What is it? Is it dove or dived? Help me out, grammarist. Dived is the traditional past tense and past particle of the verb dive. But the newer dove, which probably came without or about by analogy with similar words like drove and wove, has been in the language approximately 2 centuries and is now standard in American. Deborah dived in to save Grace. I have a feeling dived sounds more correct in this particular sentence. Writers from outside North America prefer the traditional dived by a large margin. Here are a few examples. While dived appears occasionally in American publications and slightly more often in Canadian writing, dove prevails. I don't know, there's something about the fact that it's not like, I'm not saying Square dove into the deep end by broadening the scope, it's like I'm saying they had already dove, and that sounds wrong to me for some reason. Like, using the had already dove seems wrong, but if I just said they dove into it, that would seem right. So I don't know what you call that. It's like, it's not like the regular past tense form. It's a whatever past tense. And talks for a merger with a long time. I could just say, let's just pick a different word. Let's pick a different word. They were in talks for a merger with longtime rival company Enix. We're broadening the scope. There we go. We're broadening the scope of their production capability by founding a movie studio and producing a feature-length film. Why do you think it's weird? You're wrong about that. In part. I will not do it in full. The thing is that I can't make the assumption that everyone who will watch this video has watched my Final Fantasy XII video, right? So I have to create this retrospective from the perspective of someone looking for a Lost Odyssey video, having not seen any of my videos before, and giving them some semblance of the history behind what's going on. Some people might not even know that Sakaguchi, the creator of Final Fantasy, even made Lost Odyssey, right? So it's a matter of like introducing the layman, basically. Just wondering how it was worded there. Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, actually don't necessarily love the way I did it in the FF12 review, which is part of why I want to like remake all my reviews. Let's see. Final Fantasy. Yeah, something like this, but worded differently, I guess. And transitioning game development onto brand new hardware with the PlayStation 2. This time, Final Fantasy series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi was the executive vice president of the company. respected within the culture for his role in Square's unparalleled success. I don't know if unparalleled or incredible. Gargantuan. Insane. Incredible success. Unimaginable. Astonishing, I like that. Astonishing mainstream success. He's the executive vice president of the company and well respected within the culture for his role in Square's astonishing mainstream success. And throughout the 90s. This philosophy wasn't universally supported by everyone at Square. Newly appointed CFO Yoichi Wada. Anticipating that the shareholders would ultimately side with Wada, who became president of Square shortly after. Sakaguchi had already laid down his plans to walk away from Square and start his own independent studio. I can't spell for fetching saved my life. Okie doke. I don't want to too long on this, but around the turn of the century, famed Japanese RPG studio Squaresoft was undergoing some significant internal changes. They were in talks for a merger with longtime rival company Enix, for broadening the scope of their production capability by founding a movie studio and producing a feature-length film. And we're transitioning their game development onto it's not quite right. Transitioning their workflow, maybe? Transitioning their I can say workflow. Transitioning their development workflow. I'll just say development. Well, maybe game, because I just talked about movie. And we're transitioning their game development workflow onto why can't I spell any words? Around the turn of the century, famed Japanese RPG studio Squaresoft was undergoing some significant internal changes. They were in talks for a merger with longtime rival company Enix, or broadening the scope of their production capability by founding a movie studio and producing a feature-length film, and were transitioning their game development workflow to accommodate for brand new hardware with the PlayStation 2. At this time, Final Fantasy series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi was the executive vice president of the company and was well respected within Square's culture. And was well respected within Square's culture for his role in Final Fantasy's astonishing mainstream success throughout the 90s. However, his business philosophy wasn't universally supported by everyone at Square. Newly appointed CFO Yuichi Wada, in particular, was Sakaguchi's biggest critic internally, and their disagreements came to a head when the Spirits Within bombed at the box office and lost the company tens of millions of dollars. Anticipating that the shareholders would ultimately side with Wada, who became the president of Square shortly thereafter, Sakaguchi had already laid down his plans to walk away from Square and start his own independent studio. In 2001, before the release of Spirits Within, he had already registered a trademark for Mistwalker and registered domain name. Early 2001, I should say. Before the release of Spirits Within, he had already registered a trademark for Mistwalker and registered its domain name. Though he stayed on at Square in an executive producer role on Final Fantasy 11 and 12, He was also making preparations go his own way. And in 2003, in 2003, he In early 2001, before the release of Spirits Within, he had already registered a trademark for Mistwalker and registered its domain name. Though he stayed on at Square in an executive producer role for Final Fantasy XI and XII, he was also making preparations to go his own way. And in 2003, he finally departed the company. He finally left the company. Not at which, maybe it's from which, or left the company which if that makes any sense at all. In early 2001, before the release of Spirits Within, he had already registered a trademark for Mistwalker. It's registered twice. Already registered a trademark for Mistwalker and obtained or secured its domain name. Though he stayed on at Square in an executive producer role for Final Fantasy XI and XII, he was also making preparations to go his own way, and in 2003 he finally left the company which had served as his home for 20 years, and at which he founded his name and legacy. I want to say from which. I don't know if that's right, though. Though he stayed on at Square in an executive producer role for Final Fantasy XI and XII, he was also making preparations to go his own way, and in 2003 he finally left the company which had served as his home for 20 years and from which he founded his name and legacy to begin a new phase of his career as an independent developer. Okay, I think that works for the Square portion. Now we got to do a little bit of the Mistwalker portion because he made Blue Dragon first. The Sony beef, exactly, yes. That's what we'll be getting into next. Oh, that's probably where I should start. What many people don't realize, however, is that Mistwalker was not a development. Was not really a development studio. I'll say game maker instead of developer because he's not really doing it. Okay. Well, what many people don't realize, however, is that Mistwalker was not really a development studio. Yeah, Karnak Maker. I think is my stream lagging? Am I behind? Usually it's pretty quick in terms of fetch. Where is it? I wonder if I'm not on the ultra low latency or not. I wonder if it's back to being like 30 seconds or 40 seconds behind or whatever. In any case, usually it's more like a 5 or 10 second delay, but it feels like it's more today. Oh, you have to constantly refresh to live. I got you. I think this is a good place to wrap up for today. Feel good about the direction this is moving in. We're going to talk about the fact that they're not a developer, that they had to partner with Microsoft and have the whole beef with Sony. Talk about maybe the first game, Blue Dragon, a little bit, and then get into essentially how the game was actually developed by Fuel Plus, not Mistwalker. Blue Dragon is definitely worth touching on. Morimatsu too. Yeah, I'll talk about it a little bit. But I think that's a good start. Good start for this. Tomorrow I'll probably record the Final Fantasy video and then get back to this after I'm done with that and I've posted it. Okay, guys. Appreciate you. Thank you, Karnak, for your help with helping to form the theme into a question. Appreciate it. And I'll see you guys again tomorrow. Peace out.